Hello.
Hello.
Oh, yeah.
I am Keatsta from Keatsta YouTube channel, and today we have a very special presentation from Nicole.
It's a bit of a guest video
A little guest appearance.
that I've been working on technically for several months and realistically for about a week.
Mm.
We're talking about some wrestling.
Hell yeah.
2022 professional wrestling. What a year.
What a year.
What a year, champ. You were there for it. You were there
I
for some
saw
of it.
quite a bit of wrestling this year. This year I watched way more wrestling than all other years combined.
Where you watched zero
Where I
wrestling.
watched between zero and occasional Twitter clips of wrestling, maybe.
Yeah, I guess I didn't put this in, but you and I went to 3 wrestling shows.
In 2022?
In 2022,
That's
we went
right.
to both nights of AEW in Toronto, and then we went to IWS Freedom to Fight, I think it was, in Montreal.
Mm-hmm. Like a week later.
Not
All within like the span of a week.
yeah, not a week later. That Saturday.
Yeah, that very Saturday. Yeah.
It was all in 1 week.
Crazy.
But anyways, yeah, let's get into it.
Oh, you gotta click back over here.
All right.
Yeah, you get.
Let's talk about my background with wrestling, because I'm a little bit of a freak monster. Most people, I would say, probably start watching wrestling when they're a child because it is kind of a thing that appeals to children, especially over the past 10 to 15 years. This is just not how it worked out for me. I started watching in 2017 when I was 17. A friend of mine told me, hey, watch Great Balls of Fire. So this is the first wrestling match I ever watched. The ambulance match between Roman Reigns and Braun Strowman, which I am just now noticing was sponsored by Rocket League.
Yeah. Okay.
Peculiar.
Surreal. A little peculiar.
There was a time when that was getting pushed as an esport, and then it just fucking died.
It's
It
like
died a death.
It's like alive in the same way a lot of esports are like technically alive.
It's alive like StarCraft is alive.
Yeah. I think that's a good reference point. Yeah. It's
Which
probably
is to
not
say
going to
it's
get any
basically
bigger,
dead.
but the people who enjoy it will just keep playing it forever, probably.
Yeah. So, kind of an abnormal jumping point to get into wrestling, but I've been a wrestling fan for about 5 years now. Started with WWE, which I think is probably true for, about 90% of Western wrestling fans, I would say. But then, at the time, like New Japan and Ring of Honor were super hot with Kenny Omega and the Elite. So that was all over Reddit and social media and places where you were looking to get more into wrestling. So I got super into that stuff, and then got into more just like independent stuff as the years went on. Then the pandemic happened, and then I just started watching basically every company to some degree because there was nothing else to do but watch a lot of wrestling. Oh, this was still animated. Okay. Goal of this video. It's an important goal. We have a beautiful picture of Samoa Joe and Necro Butcher. One of the greatest matches ever.
God, so fucking bloody.
But number one, more than anything, is for me. This is on record where my head was at about wrestling in 2022-2023. Number two, if you're on the Keatsta YouTube channel and you see this in your feed and you're like, that's not Keatsta, that's just a guy. Maybe you'll click on it and you'll be like, what the hell? And maybe you'll try to watch some wrestling. And that could be kind of fun. Number three, just get kind of excited because a lot of cool wrestling shit happened in 2022. It wasn't like the best year ever, but it's the first full year post-pandemic with crowds back in America, at least, in Japan, but we're getting there 2023, so that'll be a different year, and also my methodology for 2023 is already a lot better than what we did here. So let's start year in review for 2022. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. You like how I gave it a little subheading?
I like this.
That's pretty good.
Organized.
Nice little pick from
Structure.
I think it was Konosuke Takeshita produced Beer Garden show for DDT. They like to run beer garden shows. It's a cute little picture of all the guys there.
Who doesn't like drinking some beer and watching wrestling?
Exactly.
That's just the pinnacle.
Have a bone shaker. All right.
Hell yeah.
So, where are the promotions I follow at? Number one, let's talk AEW. And I've already been talking AEW today, but about stuff that didn't happen in 2022, so it doesn't matter. But you know, end of 2022, AEW is still trying to right the ship. And a really fucked up, weird year. Started off pretty strong, basically through like Double or Nothing. Still some stumbling. The Owen Hart tournament was not great. Focusing on Adam Cole and Red Dragon and Elite drama was also not good, especially with no Kenny Omega to pay it off, so it was just dragging out forever. There was bad stuff happening, but you had CM Punk healthy in main events, Moxley and Bryan Danielson kind of firing on all cylinders, and then Double or Nothing hits, CM Punk gets injured, and everything just gets really screwy. So it's very clearly an instance of like, we have some stuff planned out for this guy, and this guy is not here anymore, and now we're all fucked up. So basically the rest of the year was just all fucked up and backwards. You know, they had Jon Moxley's chant throughout the summer to right the ship, and then he lost it to CM Punk, and then CM Punk got injured again, and also got into a backstage fight, and that took him and the Elite, who had just returned, Kenny Omega had just come back from injury, removed them from programming for like another 3 months, which was also hard to recover from. They had the whole summer where MJF left because he was not getting paid enough, and we don't know if that was storyline or not, but it wouldn't be surprising. So then he came back, which kind of helped, but he's also not very good, so it didn't help that much. It was just a nightmare. It was just really messy. Around Full Gear, they finally kind of figured it out and got back on track, but you know, at this point at the end of 2022, they're still in recovery, and even where we are in March 2023, it's like we're better, but we could be doing a lot better. DDT, mostly together, really bad first half of the year for DDT, if I'm being honest. They're like very rocky, kind of undersells it. Because it's just like the creeping specter of the Japanese main event style that's happening, like, you know, is popularized worldwide by New Japan and is just like bleeding into all these other companies wanting to do all these super long, big, dramatic affairs forever and ever and ever. 40-minute matches, 15-minute matches, 60-minute time limit draws. We're gonna wrestle forever. We're gonna do 45 matches a year where we wrestle 100 minutes each. It's terrible. It's not good. And they're pushing Konosuke Takeshita as their champ, who at this point had basically done everything in DDT and was just kind of lazy. It was not very exciting. He would show a lot of personality in like 6-man tags when he was with his friends in 37 Kamina. But in actual singles matches, there was just no juice. And then, like, one of the worst matches of 2022 was him and Tetsuya Endo at Judgment. Already that show, which is like 25th anniversary of DDT, that show was like fucking 6 hours long. It was such a long show. And then the end of your show was like a 40-something, like 45, 46-minute main event between these two guys who, like, haven't really wrestled since they had a pretty good match. Actually, like, a really good match at Peter Pan in 2019. And they just, like, shit the bed here. They just were, like, they had no idea how to fill this much space. They were just doing moves. It's not great. Takeshita leaves to go to America and become a good wrestler. Endo stays as champion. Drops a fucking complete egg with Yuki Ueno. And then gets fucking knocked out cold by Katsuhiko Nakajima at Cyberfight Festival, and then they fix some shit. And you get the title on Higuchi, who is a real wrestler who likes to wrestle and doesn't hate you for watching it and wants you to actually, feel like you spent your time well. Very serious and efficient, hard-hitting, all good qualities.
No nonsense.
No nonsense. And that kind of really anchors the rest of their year. Him kind of starting off as new unit with Naomi Yoshimura, becoming tag champs with him as well. Yuki Ueno having his campaign in the Dio Grand Prix, which it was a weak Grand Prix. The real issue that I have with the second half of the year for DDT is they just start bringing in a bunch of dog shit foreigners from GCW. Which, like, Joey Janela is, like, fine, but he's not a guy I super want to see wrestling normal matches as much as I'd rather see him, going through tables and shit, because he's very good at that. And then, like, they had, like, Ricky Shane Page, who's just another guy who was good at death matches and not really great with the normal wrestling. They're bringing Cara Noir from England, and they're from England, so that's basically all you need to know. It's just not good. But, regardless... Still pretty... They ended out pretty strong. Higuchi versus Ueno was not the greatest title match, and the Euron was a little disappointing because it had very high expectations. It was basically like the two best wrestlers on their active roster. But you can't win them all. Sometimes you don't get it right the first time. Still pretty good. Now we're going to talk about GLEAT, which I found out today is actually pronounced GLEAT. Because it's like great, but with an L.
Oh, interesting.
Feels like a little racial, but
yeah.
they're Japanese, so I guess...
Strange.
Not my problem, not my place.
I liked GLEAT a lot better because it reminded me of one of the better rappers in this era.
No. But I also like saying GLEAT, so I think I'll just keep saying GLEAT.
Yeah, you can go ahead and say GLEAT.
Anyways, GLEAT was really good. GLEAT was really good this year. All their stuff is... I'm probably going to mention this again later, but all their stuff is free on YouTube. And not just like, oh, someone has uploaded them, but just their whole promotion puts all their shit on YouTube. Not just like matches, full shows front to back, nothing cut, everything in it. They just had a really great year. This is basically like their like second year as a company. They started like right at the end of 2020. Now, came in, started off hot this year, finally creating a title belt and crowning El Lindemann as their first champion, which was a great choice. So they had that to basically anchor their whole year with like this great young ace figure who's like super dynamic and explosive and exciting. They've still got, they run regular pro wrestling, they run UWF rules. They're, mixing and matching between those two divisions, getting tons of great freelancers in. They've even got a bunch of New Japan guys, which was like mostly good. They got like Evil and like Show or something, or like Big Toe, some like House of Torture shit, which was terrible. But I mean, they're terrible in New Japan too, so whatever. But they also got like Shingo Takagi, so they got Yuji Nagata for UWF stuff. It was pretty good. They had a pretty great year, kind of working with everyone. They got to send their guys out to places. They even got to have their title defended in Singapore, which is pretty crazy because I don't think there's like a super strong base of wrestling happening in Singapore, but it's all over the world. And it's all kinds of places you can find anywhere you live. Someone is doing professional wrestling. And
it's beautiful.
One of the very charming things about this is a sport or a hobby or whatever you want to call it.
An art form.
An art form, sure.
Mm-hmm.
When people talk about it as art too much, it kind of bothers me, but it's an art form.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So
not in a pretentious way. But...
Yeah, not in a theater kid way.
Yeah.
And we might end up getting into that later, but I'll try not to. But GLEAT, they just had an awesome year. Basically, all their shows are just super easy to sit there and watch, and just kind of enjoy yourself. Especially these are like really new, exciting young names or guys who. A lot of guys who like kind of got well known in Dragon Gate and then left and took a chance on themselves in the independents and then here, and it's worked out really great. Guys like Kaito Ishida, obviously Strong Hearts are like the faces of this promotion, and they all came up in Dragon Gate. There's a lot of great guys coming through here. And on top of that, guys like Takanori Ito, Yuizuka, Soma Watanabe, they're like kind of three first huge prospects that they've been training in-house, and they're doing a great job with them, and they're developing really well. They're developing better than like most other promotions are developing their young talent in Japan right now. So GLEAT, really great. Really good year for them. Who else we got? We got a little picture, the New Japan 50th anniversary event. Tatsumi Fujinami, Tanahashi, and Okada. Very feel-good moment. That being said, a New Japan, bad. Not doing great. Really bad main event scene. So I say here, bad main event scene that pours into the undercard, and that's true. I didn't put that down because it was a lie. It's probably been this way to some people depending on when you got into New Japan. I got into 2017. There was a lot of hype around Omega Okada matches, and Okada's having this super long title reign and all this stuff. So for like me, New Japan kind of stops being good around like after, I don't know, somewhere in 2019. That's when it really starts to lose steam. There's still like stuff you can watch in that year for sure. I mean, like any year of any company, but that's definitely when I fell off because they ran like 4 Sonata main events against Okada, which are so fucking boring. But I mean, for a lot of people, it was like 2015 is the peak of New Japan when AJ Styles was there. But either way, there's been a horrible, horrible fall off that has continued for quite a few years. Even now in 2023, it's still like this company is just the Okada show. And Okada's not like a terrible wrestler, but he's not been great the past few years.
Not reaching the heights of versus Kenny Omega, to be sure.
Well, not even just reaching the heights of like the consistent work of years previous. Especially once in 2018, once Omega ends that reign, is kind of, I feel like his time, Okada's time kind of being done as like a capital G great wrestler. He goes and he has some fun and comes back to the serious guy. When he comes back to the serious guy, he's just not there. And a lot of the times it wasn't there previously, but at least it was there sometimes. And now it's like once in a blue moon he turns it on. 2023, he's been better for sure. But by the end of 2022, it's just like dire. There was a little bit of reshuffling at the end of 2022 with the dissolution of Suzuki-gun that shook up stables because they were another, it's another problem in New Japan. They've had the same stables for like a decade at this point. So one of them finally dissolving helped push some stars in different directions and create some new guys and create focus on some different people. But still a pretty stale show. Not doing too great. Pro Wrestling Noah, hell, bad, and they've been bad for like over a decade. It's not been good. Misawa died 2009. They had the Sugiura reign after that. That was pretty good, but it's been spotty, and the bright spots have been very few and far between. Especially 2022 was just like Kaito Kiyomiya getting owned a bunch, having to play second fiddle to broken-ass 60-year-old Keiji Muto. This is a promotion that like hates its young wrestlers at its very core. It's very sad. The other sad part is that there's like 3 good young wrestlers there. But they could have a chance. They could do something with them. They don't do anything with them. Junior divisions are kind of a mess. 2022 is also speaking of another company that just brought in a bunch of weird dog shit foreigners. I'm pretty sure in Noah, if you just send in like a headshot and the fact that you had a match once, they'll just give you a tour. I don't know, just like guys I've never heard of in my whole fucking life have shown up there and are becoming like semi-main event players. It's bizarre, but like Timothy Thatcher gets like fucking nothing there. It's insane. Anyways, WWE. WWE's bad. It's been bad for a really long time. Even when I started watching it, it was bad. I didn't realize it was bad yet because I didn't really understand wrestling fully yet. And there was cool stuff happening because there's kind of always a cool thing happening based on the fact that they have a wealth of talent on their roster who know how to work. But this is just a company that hates wrestling and hates the idea of it and hates being associated with it. And even in the middle of the year, when big rapist Vince McMahon is forced to step down as the head of it, nothing really changes. Some of it actually gets worse, but there's a lot of opinion online that things have gotten a lot better because Triple H hired like fucking Killer Kross back. I could complain about this forever. I don't fuck with them. Don't watch them anymore. I haven't really consistently watched them since like 2019. And Super have not been making any time for them since Bryan Danielson made the leap and went to AEW. This is blocked by the camera, but Stardom, see New Japan Pro Wrestling. Same problem. Literally the same fucking problems.
Oh yeah, you can move the video around if you ever want to uncover stuff that's under text.
Oh, that's handy.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah. But
yeah.
as you said,
There you
simple
go.
message.
There you go. It's the same deal. Shuri's not a bad wrestler, but this like Bushiroad main event style, this Japanese main event style, whatever you want to call it, is not it. It's super not it for Stardom wrestlers. A lot of these women can barely throw a fucking strike sometimes. And getting them into these super long, really fucking phony feeling drawn out main event emotional title matches is not it. And it bleeds into the undercard. It's the same problem because now on your on your smaller stake shows where you're just running locally or something and you're having some local kid run up in the main event, they also have to go out there and wrestle to a fucking 30-minute time limit draw when they're not ready because this is just what you're conditioning people to expect. Not good. A lot of not good stuff happening. So I mean, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. We've gotten ourselves out of the pandemic for the most part, but there's still just a lot of like rot and unforced errors and just bad booking ideas in a lot of places. I clicked away from it again. Promotion of the year. We're getting to awards. The gold there. Got that one off of Google Images. It's still got the watermark.
That's pretty good.
It's so free. 3rd place. I did 3 places for this one. 3rd place, AEW. There's a lot of problems with AEW. I still make time to watch it every week. Like, for me, for my older brother who I talk about wrestling a lot with, who was like 15 years older than me, so he was like actually watching it when he was a kid in the 80s. This is just a thing we had been waiting on for like someone else in America to come up and do something cool and do something interesting. So even when it's been bad and they had a bad year, they did a lot of dumb shit, it's still more exciting than basically any other major televised promotion in America. They're like, you know, in terms of numbers, or if you're a dork and you're like, well, how much business do they get? They're firmly number 2, which is to be expected. But firmly number 2 is pretty good for a company that's existed for 3 years.
Yeah, that's actually amazing.
It's kind of insane.
Because there's a lot of other promotions that have been kind of just trotting along that whole time.
And if you
Able
want to
overtake them.
yeah, and promotions with big money.
Mm-hmm.
And if you even, you know, want to not be an idiot and talk about money and numbers like that fucking matters artistically, this is still the place to be if you want to be wrestling on television. Even all problems aside, for big storylines and stuff that gets TV time, it hits more often than it misses for me. Lots of exciting wrestlers. There's a roster that I really like. A lot of guys that I really like. There's not a lot of people on AEW programming that I am like actively despise as much as I am like kind of agnostic towards. So there's definitely guys where I'm like, oh, why is this guy on TV? But it's not like the end of the fucking world. On average, you know.
It's not like offending you. It's just sort of like,
It's not offending me, or even if it is offending me, it's like I'm still probably getting like one match I really like a show, and sometimes a really great match, and then every pay-per-view, which they went from 4 to 5 with Forbidden Door stuff. So many great matches every time. There's basically never been a pay-per-view from AEW I've watched that had a bad match. The closest thing was Revolution 2021, and I still really liked the exploding barbed wire death match that was the main event of that show. The problem was the aftermath. The rest of that show was kind of dog water for me, but they still got the sauce. Punk versus Moxley, great anchoring feud, as you can see here. It's going to do the runner-up, second place, DPW, Deadlock Pro Wrestling, the podcast, which is now an independent promotion, and I don't know if you've heard this, but word on the street is they were having one hell of a year, and it's true. They were having one hell of a year. First year for Southeast Independent Promotion based out of North Carolina. Really great stuff. As far as independents go right now, the Southeast is the place to be, and there's a lot of Southeast indie stuff that I couldn't get to because there's so much fucking wrestling in the world. And I just did not have the discipline because I started playing Final Fantasy XIV. But from what I did see, from what I did make sure to make time for, because I love Deadlock as a podcast, been listening to them for a couple of years, this was really great stuff. A lot of really great regional Southeast talent. They were getting guys like Adam Priest. They were getting, you can see in this picture, Violence is Forever. Kevin Kuhn and Dominic Guarini are both incredible. They were getting fucking Andrew Everett, who had a great time in PWG in the middle of the 2010s. They've got Emi Sakura as their women's champion. So much great stuff is happening in DPW. And even beyond that, not just getting in people who are already in America. So many great Joshi imports. They were having Miyu Yamashita, Maya Yuki. They had like 3 Jungle Kyona matches this year. In a year where she had like 6 matches before she got injured again, because apparently they like didn't repair her meniscus right during surgery or something fucked up. Either way, this is one of the premier, kind of super indies, if you want to call it that right now. It's maybe not on that level. It's not like a Warrior Wrestling or a PWG, but they're like actually booking storylines. No fucking independent promotion books storylines anymore. Like, only the Southeast is booking storylines. Southeast First, Action, DPW, these are people who actually want to make you look at indie wrestling beyond just like, oh, that guy's cool. GCW would never book a storyline if you held a gun to their fucking heads. And there's some early kinks. To be fair, their YouTube show was a little weird. There was a lot of focus on talent I did not care for so much, like Kid Bandit, super not for me. But they've kind of grinded through it, and they found a formula that's been really working for me, and that I think has been really working for them, and I really like them. So I think they're going to be having a pretty big 2023, and based on what just happened like 2 days ago, when they had Violence is Forever versus the Workhorsemen in a steel cage match, I think it's been working pretty good. So, first place is GLEAT. You probably guessed this when I was kind of running down promotions I watched this year and where they're at. I only had good things to say about GLEAT.
Let's go GLEAT!
Because GLEAT's kind of awesome. This is the second year. Second year of this promotion, they were doing fantastic. Al Lindemann is just kind of the perfect choice somehow. I was always like, I liked him, but I didn't really expect to like him this much. And especially as an ace figure, as this weird little goblin brat who also is able to go out there and carry himself with a lot of dignity. He's just like an excellent choice to kind of anchor their year. And when he's not wrestling in the big title singles matches, there's just like a Strong Heart 6-man on every show that's super exciting. Tons of exciting wrestlers mixing up. They got Bulk Orchestra. They've got all these fucking shooter guys. They got UWF stuff. No huge misses from them this year. Like I said before, some of the New Japan imports didn't always work. And by didn't always, I mean specifically Evil did not work. But like they got a pretty great main event title match with Dookie. That's kind of insane. because he's a pretty unknown quantity at this point. They were making a lot of good use with everything they had in-house, making great use of the people they were getting to come in. And this shit's all on YouTube. You can just watch it. You can just go watch it right now. Click away from this video. It doesn't matter. Just go watch some Glee. Fuck you.
Before you click away, though, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.
Don't do that.
And ring the bell. You know, like wrestling. It's all
Alright.
about ringing the bell.
It's all about ringing the bell, baby.
Alright, show of the year.
Let's talk show of the year. I'll get to it when I get to it.
Okay. Tell me when it's time for the drum roll.
So there's no time for drum roll. I read the headers. Relax yourself. Show of the year. Third place. King of DDT Finals Night. This was a great show. It's like I said earlier, really bad first half of the year for DDT. This show was the biggest reset for them. It gave them so much momentum. It was so incredible. Semi-finals, final tournament matches for King of DDT. Higuchi versus Jun Akiyama. Naomi Yoshimura versus Yuki Ueno. Both great. And then Yoshimura versus Higuchi. Fantastic main event. Higuchi finally winning the title that it feels like he probably should have had around his waist a couple years ago at this point. It was just great. It was a great feeling. It was like basically where their year really started. This was a feel-good title win for the best wrestler on their roster. So few places it felt like the champion was the best wrestler they had on their roster. And GLEAT was one of them. AEW had it with Moxley and Punk, to be fair. And DDT had it with Higuchi. They struck gold with this guy. And this was just a great show. Lots of great little undercard six-mans. Seeing all the other roster members shake it up. Getting to see guys like Harashima work is always nice. But this was really a three-match show, and the three matches were all great. Runner-up. Just Tap Out Promotions. Takataichi Despy Mania.
There is no need to welcome death.
This
That's
was...
badass.
And the main event was badass. This was another great show. This was the first show in Japan. I don't know if that's true. It's the first show that I watched in Japan from 2022 that had a full cheering crowd. Which really... The main event was awesome. Main event deathmatch, you're going to see it on later in the video, one of the matches of the year. It was fantastic. But just overall, the atmosphere... the kind of independent talent they got. This is the first time I saw Tomoka Inaba, who we were also going to see on the Match of the Year list later. Great independent Joshi wrestler. There was just a lot of exciting stuff, and the crowd was hot for all of it. And it capped it off with one of the most magnetic junior heavyweights in New Japan, wrestling one of the most magnetic deathmatch wrestlers in the world. And it was just fucking magical. And also, Despy took his mask off, and this guy is a fucking hunk. I don't know if you noticed, this dude is very handsome.
Well, he's a little... It's difficult to tell right now, but I
Well,
can believe it.
You can, I don't know, you can even see it there. You're like, damn, in my opinion.
He's got like a brooding feel to him.
He's got
I
a
like
very,
that.
yeah,
Yeah, there's an intensity I like.
he's got a very, he's got an X factor to him.
I'd like to see him cleaned up a bit maybe before I make my final judgment.
I think all pictures of him without his mask on, he's like covered in face paint because he wears it under the mask.
Okay. Oh, I thought that was blood at first.
Well, that's blood.
Okay,
That's all blood. Down here, you see some wispy white stuff.
I
That
see,
was
I
like
see.
the face paint. Anyways, great show. Really fun show. But of course, show of the year for me, it just kind of had to be Forbidden Door. This was something we've been hoping for. I think most wrestling fans, fans of AEW, at least New Japan fans who were hard New Japan fans, were very mad about this idea for a while. People have been wanting this. That would be fun. It's not really super often. We've been getting a lot of big interpromotional cross-produced shows like this in the past few years. So this was a big event, and it was everything I had wanted, basically. There were no matches that I thought were bad on it. Everyone did a really great job. Even people I don't like Will Ospreay, did enough to not let the ship down in the spots they were given. Everyone was firing on all cylinders. Just a super breezy watch. Even going back to like a lot of these matches, they just fly by. Just from like the special feeling of seeing teams or wrestlers from these two different worlds cross over. It was just a great show. It was just a super happy feeling show. Celebration of what's good about pro wrestling. Topped off with a great main event of Moxley versus Tanahashi. We'll talk about it later. It was just some damn good wrestling.
And what's happening in June?
In June, we are going to Forbidden Door 2. That's happening in Toronto.
Hell yeah!
So it's March right now, so we don't really know shit about what's going to be there, but we're going. Yeah.
Hopefully it'll live up. Forbidden Door 1?
I accidentally double tapped and spoiled, but feud of the year. I didn't list a bunch of them because there wasn't like a ton of, I guess, stuff that I would in my head was thinking like was a feud, which is my baby brain, and there have been other feuds like 37 Kamina versus Burning, which is probably more consistent. But for me, feud of the year had to be CM Punk versus MJF. I am not a big MJF fan. At the time, I was more of an MJF fan than I am now. I feel like over his return from being away, like, it was okay at first, but then once he won the title, he's been rubbing me the wrong way. A lot of his shtick is really not working for me. And then going back to seeing his other stuff, that stuff also was no longer working for me. But despite all that, this was CM Punk at the top of his game, completely elevating everything about MJF and making him look like a potential main event star. So many, like, week to week, you talk about like creating must-watch TV, knowing that these guys were going to go at each other every week in promos was all the reason you need to turn on Dynamite. The wrestling didn't even matter at that point. And for Punk's part, he was just being excellent like he's always been as a promo guy since like fucking 2003 or something. For MJF though, this was like someone getting out there on the mic who can match him, and not only match him but go past him and force him to actually get creative and say good things and not just be doing this like mid-card little battling bullshit that he does. He really made him work for this and take everything he had. And for the matches, not as in love with the matches as I was at the time. And especially not as a lot of people are. A lot of people, the dog collar match was the best match of the year. I think it was pretty good. You'll see it. Their first TV meeting, too long. Not a lot going on. Kind of exposed a lot of the thin stuff in MJF's wrestling for me. But still, as far as like overall what you want from pro wrestling television, what you want from a week-to-week storyline that culminates in this huge catharsis, this was the closest AEW has gotten to complete perfection. They really knocked it out of the park with this. And, as much as I'm going to sit here and give most of the credit to CM Punk, MJF had to show up, and he did show up. So that's feud of the year. Now we're going to talk about smaller scale, promo of the year. Now there are, like, real answers to this that I will not dispute from people. CM Punk, Will You Be My Valentine promo, challenging MJF to the dog collar match. Beautiful, amazing. I was just talking about how all those promos were great. CM Punk going off on every person who's ever wronged him in history after All Out. Also basically promo of the year. But for me, the one that I have quoted the most in my daily life is Cody's last AEW promo. This is the funniest promo
Oh
I've ever seen from this motherfucker. This guy's a psycho. Look at his face.
This is like the perfect screen cap.
Look at this fucking guy.
This is
Starting
that fucking face.
starting it with which is now like his catchphrase now that he does promos in WWE with so what do you guys want to talk about? So good, his little weird fucking spurks when he just puts over the lethal injection super hard out of nowhere for no reason. Avoid, avoid, avoid. I say that shit constantly. I say that to my dog. I fucking love this thing. Everyone's booing him. Everyone's going shut the fuck out at him for no reason. Even when they like cheer him and then remember that they hate him and start booing him again. Well, he's just talking about how like he did all the shit that CM Punk wanted to do, and he remembers the mission statement, all this shit. It is the most perfect encapsulation of Cody's last year in AEW. This is just like Cody personified as a character in AEW. He wants to be a face really fucking bad. He literally breaks kayfabe completely in this promo, just saying, this is why I will never turn heel. As some weird, like, last-ditch effort, like, if maybe people got super on his side, he wasn't gonna leave. Like, he's such a freak. And it fits in so perfectly with, like, that Bryan Danielson quote, where he said, I love lying, and I learned to love lying from Cody Rhodes. Because Cody is a great liar. I don't know what the fuck in this was true, what was a lie, why he decided to bring random shit up. He just fucking rambles for so long. And I could watch it 1,000 times and love it every time. This is the greatest promo of the year. Like, I gave you real answers. I gave you quality. I gave you the funny CM Punk promo where he shits on every guy ever. But honest to God, it has to be this one. This one, he's just such a unlovable creep psycho that I love him more than anyone. Tag Team of the Year. This is going to be brief. This is not going to shock anyone who's followed wrestling. It's FTR. We're going to talk about them later. We're going to talk about them a great deal later, in fact. For right now, I'm going to bring up some of the runners-up. We'll start with the Briscoes because they're kind of obvious runner-up choice. Their year was basically just feuding with FTR, but those were two of the best matches of the year, and then a middle one that was like okay. But the two ones that were good were like some of the greatest tag matches I've ever seen in my life. So that does a lot for them. And also they had that funny showcase main event at that terrible GCW Hammerstein show at the start of the year that was like 5 minutes long, and it was them versus Nick Gage and Matt Tremont. That was mostly just like breaking doors over each other, which is just like funny.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's just kind of rocks.
It's LA Beast behavior.
Very much so, yeah. So then Fuminori Abe and Shigehiro Irie. This was in WXW World Tag Team Festival. Normally Abe is Astronauts with Takaya Nomura, but Nomura didn't come out to Germany for this for, I don't know, whatever reason. He was not booked, so he was teamed with Irie, and they were a great little tag team. The WXW weekend stuff, the single tournament, 16 karat, and then the tag tournament, I think they might do some other stuff. I'm not fully up on them. Their promotion I'm kind of digging into and catching up on. But it was just really great wrestling. People come from all over Germany to see this stuff. They're always super hot for it. It's just a lot of fun. And they were a fun tandem. And Violence is Forever, who were also on that weekend and were really great, and that's most of the work I saw from them this year. Also, some of their stuff in DPW that was super fun. They had a match with the Workhorsemen that wasn't like great, but it was just like a fun environment. They're having a really good time with it. The match starts, and the crowd just immediately chants, "This shit fucks." So they just all walk to the back because they're like, well, I guess we did it. And then they come back out, and then the crowd chants other stuff. And it's normally the chanting stuff kind of gets annoying if the crowd hijacks it. But in that kind of environment where everyone's having fun with it and playing along, it was just really great. And they're a really great team. I've seen some of their stuff from previous years. They're just really like hard-hitting and in your face, the exactly kind of wrestling that I like. Really good grappling focused stuff. They're really great together. And then I guess second place. I don't know if these were ordered. I don't really remember, but their runners up. Harimau, which was Kazusada Higuchi and Naomi Yoshimura. Kind of a short-lived run because Yoshimura got injured in the Dio Grand Prix. But despite that, a really fun one. Just like a really fun, good time tag team. Our team, they were like, not a ton of like tag team offense or maneuvers or whatever, but they're just like having a good time together. And they're hitting dudes hard and they're getting in there to beat the shit out of guys together. And they just had a lot of great matches, really easy to watch. So that's other tag teams. FTR, there's a lot to talk about with them way later. But for now, this is what's happening. Alright, there we go. I forgot to put it back in. There we go. Match of the year.
This one needs a drum roll.
We got a lot of these bad boys. Yeah, give me a little drum roll. Because this is kind of the match of the year segment. It's not just the match of the year. I got 20 of these bitches.
Oh shit! Oh, I thought you were doing top 10.
We're in top 20. And
Hell
also
yeah.
top 20 wrestlers of the year.
Hell yeah.
We're about to get into the weeds. Some disclaimers. Featuring a great picture of Cody with his torn pec.
Oh my god. I still can't get over that.
That shit was gnarly. That match stank, though. No New Japan on this list. Only one WWE match. There's a reason for that. There's nothing from wrestlers on here that I heavily dislike. A lot of stuff, you look, Voices of Wrestling, Reddit polls, Twitter polls. People are big into Will Ospreay, Seth Rollins, Del Fantasmo. I think they're all hacks. I don't like them. I think they're bad. I think their matches are bad. I think they very rarely have good matches. And most of their like super heavily praised work is not great. The Okada versus Ospreay matches, not my cup of tea. I think they stink. And an important thing to remember, if you are a wrestling fan who has come to this and you have a similar mindset to me, is that most wrestling media figures are fools and have horrible taste and don't know what good things are. So you need to go out there and find people that do. Me, I read handwork reviews on WordPress. Brock Hates Wrestling is really good. Joseph Monticello, who has just been like great for years, doing all these video essays. Just did another video detailing the Claudio Eddie Kingston rivalry for ROH. Super smart guy. Super smart guys who all know a lot about wrestling. Snowboy on Twitter, also great taste, is into good matches. So, the people are out there. The people who like good wrestling are out there, whichever, that means to you. For me, those men and people like them are not it. And I don't want to be a big hater, because this is mostly a video trying to talk about good stuff at this point. We kind of got a lot of the hater stuff out early. So I want to be positive, but just, if there's some guy who gets the inclination, if he is like 50 minutes in now, to be like, why wasn't this on here? Here's your reason. Number 20. CM Punk versus MJF dog collar match from Revolution. I wanted to deny this match. Like, I really did. Because for the longest time, the more I thought about it, the more stuff about it bothered me. Like, watching at the time, I was like a little underwhelmed. I thought it was going to be like the best thing I'd ever seen, and I like didn't get why. And now I understand why. And because I understand the parts of it that I don't like, I just have a greater appreciation for it overall. There is a part of me in my soul that wants to be a contrarian about these things. But sometimes you can't deny yourself pleasure. And there's few greater joys in wrestling for me, and in wrestling this year in particular, than a couple of guys bleeding a shit ton connected by a chain. There is a better version of this that we're going to talk about later, but this is still pretty good. This is another great CM Punk performance. This guy is so good. This guy is one of the greatest of all time. This guy knows what wrestling is. And for MJF, his best performance to date. And not just to date in 2022, but since we're here in the future in 2023, he was shit in the Iron Man match. This is the best performance from him. All of his annoying little tendencies and like false showiness, this real like phony trying to be Ric Flair thing, which like you can go like, oh, it's kind of supposed to feel phony, but there's like phony in that he's a heel, and then there's phony in that he shouldn't be in main events. And I feel the second towards him a lot of the time, with a lot of his shtick and a lot of the fucking goosing around that he does. But it is tempered here by grit. CM Punk has grit in this match. He brings violence, he brings meanness, he bleeds like a son of a gun. He bleeds so much. All over his beautiful white shorts. Great throwback gear and throwback entrance from Punk. Made me super happy to hear the old Ring of Honor AFI theme again. To see him come out. Not a lot of people in the crowd seem to know, which was kind of funny to me, because I feel like AEW crowds have a reputation for being very like smarky, like in the know a lot of history about guys, but people were like, they were singing along, but some people, at least at first, seemed very confused at what this song was. But I had personally been predicting that he was going to do this, if not now, then at some point during his run. But this seemed like the most prudent time with how much was like calling back to his old Ring of Honor work. His stuff against Raven, that dog collar match, where he even cuts a similar promo about becoming a monster to fight the monsters of the world. This was a super fun match. A lot of MJF stuff, you know, he needs to get heat so he goes over. A lot of times I'm like, this guy shouldn't have gone over. This guy should have just got his ass beat and then gone and been a dick to someone else. This is the time they made sure he got his ass beat. He just got the shit kicked out of him. He used some tricks. He got away with some stuff. He managed to, you know, get the upper hand and inflict some real damage. But this was like, he was scared. He was begging off. This was like this was the stuff that you want from him. And Punk was like so great and righteous on the other side of this, beating the shit out of this little fucking twerp for all the crap he'd been putting him through, making him bleed a whole fucking gallon's worth on Dynamite in Daly's place, handcuffing him to the ropes and cutting him open and saying he's the devil. And he got his ass beat for it, and he'd been fucking around with Wardlow too much. Perfect little cap to this. There's a little bit of shenanigans leading up to the end that makes me lose it a bit. Some little moments here and there that are not perfect. But when Wardlow pretends he can't find that ring, and then once MJF is down, finds it and gives it to Punk, it was just a perfect moment. It was one of those perfect pro wrestling moments. The arena exploded. It was everything you wanted from both of these storylines intersecting. One of the greatest, you know, kind of emotional catharsises that AEW managed to do all year. So it's a fun little match. It's not one that I love more than a lot of other matches, because there's a lot of stuff I love this year, but a hit is a hit. You gotta give them the hits sometime. 19. Bryan Danielson versus Daniel Garcia. Fight for the Fallen. This was a really excellent match. So it was, say, the best singular performance by Bryan Danielson in 2022. It's not to say he was not in better matches, but individually, what he does here, I was impressed by the most. Coming back from a layoff after Anarchy in the Arena, playing into his injuries, and putting over Daniel Garcia so huge as an opportunist, vicious, really great stuff. had to clear myself a bit there. Really, really great stuff. Like, obviously with these two guys, the technical work is just going to be immaculate because it's Bryan Danielson and Daniel Garcia, and they're just that good. But compared to their 2 out of 3 falls match, which I did like, but not as much as I loved this, there's just a lot more emotion. There's a lot more like meanness to Daniel Garcia in this. The aggression. It's not in the storyline yet with Jericho with the, oh, do I want to join him or Brian or whatever. None of that shit. He's just here to make a name for himself at the expense of the greatest wrestler of all time. And he does it. He does it in a complete shock. But this is how you do this correctly. They have tried to do this with Brian. Many companies have tried to do this with Brian, and they've done it not so correctly. But when you just let him take the wheel and do what needs to be done, magic happens. It was just an excellent match. One of the better TV matches of the year. Just really, really solid stuff. And especially in like coming off of 2021 where Bryan Danielson was the wrestler of the year pretty undisputedly for me. This was definitely a weaker year for him in terms of output. A lot of that kind of out of his control. But when he had the time to go in there and make a hit, he made a hit. And this is one of those times. 18. Remember that main event of Forbidden Door I talked about? We're here. Moxley versus Tanahashi. This is a match I've been waiting for basically all year. This is the thing I wanted when Moxley first went to New Japan in 2019. I was wanting it every time he's been near the U.S. title since. There was a couple times that like almost happened this year, then one of them got turned into like a 4-way, I think a Capital Collision, which really PO'd me to not like that. Taking a perfect idea for a match like Moxley versus Tanahashi and injecting heel Juice Robinson and Will Ospreay into it. It's disgusting. But they made good. And they gave it to us as the main event, Forbidden Door. And it was everything I wanted for the interim AEW championship. I mean, it was just exciting. I don't know how much belief there was that Hiroshi Tanahashi could win here, but I thought it was possible anyways. I thought it would have been neat to have him as interim champion since they originally booked him versus CM Punk as the main event. I thought maybe, okay, they have him as a champion so they can make good on that match. But Jon Moxley winning was just as likely just to have a guy who's in the US all the time. I guess thinking more about it, it makes no sense to put on this random Japanese guy that isn't going to be in your company. Like, okay, but at the time it felt like it could go either way. They could get kind of sick with it. But as it played out, it was just amazing. It was a mean performance from Mox. It was not, a lot of these big star versus big star, like I say, your ace versus ace kind of main event are very like, oh, we're being respectful and we're kind of doing each other's stuff. But the great thing about Moxley's work against New Japan guys, especially the ones they import into AEW, is that he kind of holds no respect for them. Not like, actually, but in his wrestling, he does not do these little holds and cute little tricks to be like, oh, I gotta make sure you guys know I'm a fan of this guy. He gets in there and he wants to hurt him. And he does. Obviously, he bleeds a shit ton because he's Moxley and that's what he does. But he is vicious here and he is mean and he is grinding into Tanahashi and making him work for everything. And Tanahashi is just my hero forever. I love this man. Even in this later stage of his career where he's kind of, lost a step or two athletically, he still brought all the big main event hits here. Huge high fly flow off the top to the outside. Took a big table bump. And they were putting over on commentary a lot about, his match with Kenta at Wrestle Kingdom that year, and how it was like a no DQ, and he had to do all this weapon stuff, and how it's not how he likes to wrestle, and how he was like, oh, I felt bad about that. So then having him get in here with another guy like Moxley, who just wants to drag you not into like a wrestling match, but into a fight, and you just can't help but cheer for Tanahashi, at least a little bit. Moxley's awesome too. He does the perfect job of riding the line, of not being like a heel, but just being aggressive, which is what he needs to be and fits with his character. But Tanahashi is just the perfect little man, the perfect little hero. No matter what period of his career that he is in, he's going to fight, and he fights hard in this. He fights for everything, and that's really a lot of what makes the match. So another great one. Number 17. Another Revolution. You know, there's a lot of Revolution here, and it occurs to me that you might think it odd that I have... Spoiler, I have 3 matches from Revolution on my Matches of the Year list. I only have 1 for Forbidden Door. And yet Revolution is not my show of the year. Why is this? Average quality. Everything on Forbidden Door was like, you know, bottomed out at like 3.5 out of 5, let's say. Whereas Revolution had some kind of stinker stuff on it that I really did not care for. Had a lot of high highs, a lot of peaks, but there was not consistency. I like to value consistency. Anyways, Eddie Kingston versus Chris Jericho is one of the peaks. Opened the show. Really great, exciting opener. You know, not the hottest feud going into the show compared to Punk or MJF, but there was a lot of steam behind this. And it just completely knocked it out of the park. I mean, real 90s All Japan tribute style match. A lot of throws on the skull. A lot of big chops. Chris Jericho, his most interesting work of the year here. And it's the kind of thing that pisses me off, because he could be this guy all the time, but he chooses not to be because he has a bad brain. But doing the Akira Taue bit, working the orbital of Kingston, which I, 99.9% chance that was an Eddie Kingston idea, really great. He could be this good all the time, and he was this good here. This is the kind of match that needs both guys on either side of it to get what you're doing, or else you just get something really stupid. But they got what they were doing. And it was just... There's not even a lot to say about it mechanically. They just hurt each other real bad. There's some big, nasty bumps in this. A lot of shit right on the neck. It looks great. It looks vicious. It's like a little shocking the first time watching it. I did not expect them to go this far. I kind of had low expectations for this match originally. Because I thought there's only like so much Eddie can bring out of Jericho. This Jericho came back from a health scare. He got in like the best shape of his life. He looked really good, especially in this match. And he brought it. He completely brought it. I have a lot of negative stuff to say about him as a wrestler, as a person. He brought it here. And on the other side of this, Eddie Kingston is an incredible wrestler. He was immaculate. He finally got a big win. This was like his first huge singles win in AEW as a guy whose thing was kind of like being an almost. And it felt like a massive moment. And at the time, it felt like he was a can't-miss babyface. Obviously, this was all soiled. But at the time, he had all the momentum in the world. And still going back, even being kind of salty about that, this is just an incredible wrestling match. 16. Our third appearance from Revolution. Bryan Danielson versus Jon Moxley. They deliver their vision of pro wrestling, and it's beautiful. This is when Moxley came into AEW and said he wanted to deliver glorious pro wrestling violence. The year he has And matches like this are exactly what I imagined. This is, in a vacuum, basically kind of like everything I would want out of a wrestling match. Which I know maybe sounds insane when it is 16 out of 20. But there's a lot of factors into where things get placed. But in terms of the actual like work that both guys do, I just love it so much. There's so much great. This overall, Moxley had a hell of a year. But these first 2 or 3 months when he came back from rehab, so fantastic. A lot of grappling heavy stuff that he was implementing on display here, and some other matches, a few we'll talk about later. The strikes, the submissions, all the stuff that he started working in more, even like when he left WWE, talking about training at like Couture MMA and stuff. All really comes together great here, especially with Brian as his partner, as another guy who's well versed in jiu-jitsu and catch wrestling. It's just a wonderful slice of violence. Another thing, a lot of the matches on this list are violent. Because the best thing about wrestling is the violence. It's men hurting each other, just beating the absolute shit out of each other and bleeding a bucket along the way. This is also, in the Fight for the Fallen match, also this match, one of many very funny Bryan Danielson blade jobs. Fight for the Fallen match is where he cuts himself and then is bleeding, and they have the whole camera shot of the doctor checking on him, and the blade is on the floor next to him, so the ref has to kick it away in the shot. And then this one is the one where he cuts himself, and then the ref goes over to tell him that it's not bleeding that much, and he cuts himself again, and you can see it both times. But it's awesome. Even when if you're new, a thing to keep in mind with wrestling. Sometimes you're going to see the seams. You're going to catch some stuff that maybe doesn't make sense. But as long as the shit is awesome enough, it will never matter. Just the act of bleeding is cool enough that I kind of don't care if I see a guy making it happen. This was a great match. Another in a line of great matches for both these guys in their careers and in AEW, and led to the formation of the Blackpool Combat Club, which is the coolest stable that AEW has. They were just the coolest group of all time. Another thing that got fumbled this year, because there were a lot of fumbles and a lot of unforced errors, but that still does not take away from how fucking cool they are. 15. Tomoka Inaba versus Suzu Suzuki from the Just Tap Out 50th anniversary. It had some subtitle Takataishi Forever 2.0 Vegas Bungus. Either way, the 50th anniversary. I don't even know if JTO has existed that long, but it must have. Or else they wouldn't call it this. This is two of the best, most exciting independent Joshi wrestlers right now. These are like, I'm behind on this. I have only seen, majorly Suzu Suzuki stuff in Stardom, where she was like kind of one of the only bright spots in 2022 Stardom. But these women are both excellent. They're, all on the Japanese, independent women's promotions, independent promotions, doing a lot of great stuff. And this was like a surprise hit of the year for me. One of the biggest surprise hits for me. Because it came right at the end. It's two people that I was familiar with. Suzuki way more than Inaba, but still relatively unknown to me, who just went out and had like a really fantastic hard-hitting match. I feel, especially watching so much Stardom this year, so many people do not lay their strikes in that promotion. Suzu Suzuki had some hard elbows in this match, and Inaba kicked the shit out of her. Just really great, stiff, beat the dog shit out of each other title match. Suzu Suzuki, just as a character, there are a lot of people that try to get themselves across as oh, I'm such a fucker. But you just really believe it with her. She just really does a great job of getting across that I'm kind of a bastard, I'm kind of an asshole, I'm kind of a sicko. And Inaba so fired up against that. Perfect backdrop for her to just tee off, and just it was awesome. It's hard to talk about these matches sometimes and quantify them other than they were just awesome. Speaking of awesome, this picture right here, El Desperado and Dookie versus Jun Kasai and Tomoaki Honma from Just Tap Out Takataichi Mania 2.5. This is the first big hit between Jun Kasai and El Desperado this year. We're going to get to their other one later. But this tag match here, a lot of super creative stuff. This is the first time he cracked out the aluminum cans cut in half on a board gimmick. That just looks so gnarly.
Oh my god. That's so scary.
Yeah, this is a scary little picture.
That is a beautiful picture right there.
There's a lot of great stuff to say about it. I mean, there's so many little unique things. Deathmatch wrestling is very routine in a lot of ways, especially in America, but in Japan as well. There's some stuff you do, and that's about it. You do your tubes, go through some tables, maybe there's some other stuff, but they get pretty creative here. They leave a lot on the table, and everything they leave on the table they go for later in their singles match. But here, especially with the tag environment, they do just enough. A lot of good, gnarly stuff. Everyone gets a bleed on. There's some skewers. Chairs are flying everywhere. People are going through tables. Kasai gets his weird, metal scaffolding shit set up on the ropes. And the cans. We love the cans. And because Desperado and Kasai are kind of saving some of their stuff for later, and not going full bore, their stuff is still really great. But then Dookie and Tomoaki Honma both do a lot of great shit in this match and get to really kind of have this be their showcase in a lot of ways. Dookie especially is a guy who I don't know if I've ever seen him in this kind of environment before. And you just hear him screaming as he's getting the freaking knife jammed into his forehead, and you really feel for him. He does a really great job as kind of the face on the side of this match, whereas Desperado was way more of he's a face, but he's also just a force. Dookie is way more purely just likable as this guy who's kind of dragged into it with him and is getting fucked up. Number 13, from the very start of the year, Hangman Page versus Bryan Danielson. Why did I put sequel one of the best matches of 2022? I meant 2021. One of the best matches of 2021 that came right at the end of 2021 was the 60-minute time limit draw these guys had on TV. And 3 weeks later, they got to have a sequel that was also awesome. Beautiful pro wrestling violence. Blood and headbutts. This is a match built around bleeding and headbutting each other.
A winning combo.
A winning combo. It's
Put
another
the blood from your head on their head, and vice versa.
a lot of stiff hits. They're not really cracking each other with the headbutts because that would be frowned upon on American television and American promotions. But it still looks good. You get some sound out of them a couple times, and it's oh. And just the built-in story from the first match of Danielson was in control but lost control, and if the time didn't run out, Hangman had him beat. So they're both a lot more frantic here, a lot more aggressive, hitting each other harder and more often. And it's more, that first match was about testing Hangman's mettle as a champion, but this is him asserting himself as I am the fucking champion, and there's a reason for this. And it's because I'm going to go in here with the greatest wrestler of all time, and I'm going to beat the dog shit out of him, and I'm going to smack my skull into his, and I'm going to come out on top. And overall for me, I think this is in AEW, as far as in-ring chemistry, the best pairing they have. They had a third match later in the year in the World Title Eliminator Tournament when they went, oh shit, our champion got injured for a second time this year and we have to crown a new one. And that one was not as great as this or the first one, but it was still really, really good. and also worth checking out if you want like a more low-key affair. But obviously, on a lot of these lists, and I am not immune to this, is that big high-stakes matches kind of get the attention. And this was one of them, and it was excellent. CM Punk versus Jon Moxley from Dynamite. This is the best squash match of the year. And this stands out because there was another squash match on Double or Nothing, Wardlow versus MJF. It's another match that I liked at the time, but I went back and watched it and was like, this match actually annoys me a lot. Because it doesn't get to the point. There's a lot of stooging around, and there's, to be expected, there should be a couple of those spots of MJF tricking to get away. But there was just too much stepping around and tippy-tapping back and forth before you get to the thing that you want, which is him getting powerbombed a bunch by Wardlow. Here, different idea. Not like a heel getting their comeuppance, but short and to the point, and all of it works into the match's favor. Having them get so heated the previous week that they just had to have the match this week for the unification. Punk, like Brian earlier, did he come back from injury too fast? And that plays into this. He throws a big kick and his foot gives out and Moxley jumps on it. And immediately leads to him just beating the dog shit out of him and hitting him with 2 Death Riders and winning. It was a huge shock. It put a lot of juice into All Out. I mean, I don't know, it feels maybe kind of strange to recommend you like a possibly sub 5-minute match as better than all these other matches that I've given effusive praise to. But just as like a piece of booking, this was so effective and so excellent. There's a lot of debate on whether or not this was a good idea. For me, I thought it was a great idea because it added a lot of intrigue to what felt very much like, oh, well then Moxley loses and we get back to the CM Punk stuff. Instead it was like Moxley is here to stay because he is the guy. Number 11, we made it to GLEAT. This is the only GLEAT appearance on here. That is not the fault of GLEAT. They had a lot of 4 stars, a lot of 3.75s and stuff. But this list started at 4 1/4, and we go higher. Is where we ended up. And I couldn't even fit all the 4 1/4s on here. I had to make cuts. I had to make decisions. GLEAT had a very high bar of consistency, but definitely their best match of the year. El Lindaman versus Shigehiro Irie. Big Frog Man versus Little Goblin Man. These guys, I mean, they're stablemates in the Strong Hearts, so I mean, that's definitely an element that plays into it, I think. The idea of, like, no one fights like brothers fight, Like family fights. It's about family, like Fast and Furious. And this is kind of...
But it's also a bit of Big Frog Man versus a Little Goblin Man.
Well, it's about, like, it's kind of like Big Brother Irie comes in and is like... Because one of the great things about El Lindaman, which I thought I was going to save for later, but we'll just get into now, is that he's kind of a little fucker. And so... The things about his title matches against some of the guys who are like similar in size to him, because he is a smaller dude, he's like 5'7" or something, is that it's like if your friend's little brother got really jacked. So he's like still this kind of like weird shitty little guy, but he's got a dark tan and 6-pack abs, and he's kind of a dickhead about it.
Hell yeah.
So against guys that he's more evenly matched against, he gets to be kind of a brat, which is like a fun dimension to him. It's kind of a fun thing to have, especially for Strong Hearts as a unit, that you just kind of have the little fucker guy. And so then when Irie comes in and is bigger and stronger than him and is just immediately mashing him with elbows, like there's a turn early in this match where it goes from kind of like feeling each other out to Irie just pastes him with an elbow. and Lindemann is on the back foot, and it gives him his best pure babyface performance as a champion, as the T-Rex title holder. Because he's always a little ball of energy, but there's like so much fire behind it now as he keeps trying to get back in. You can see the screenshot. Insane spot where Irie first like crossbodies him in the face out to the outside, and then immediately picks him up, goes for a pile driver on the mats, realizes no, that's on the mats, and takes him over to the floor to dump him on his head on the floor. Because he's like, this is my shitty little brother in Strong Hearts. I'm gonna make you fight for this fucking title, you little shit. I'm gonna hurt your ass. So he, some huge suplexes, some great moments. One of the most fun things in wrestling is watching El Lindemann try and eventually succeed to pick up a larger man. And when he does, he gets so juiced. But man, he gets hit with some nasty ass headbutts in this match. We talk about like, there's some, headbutts in the Bryan Hangman match. They don't go super hard. They go hard with them here. They're like gross. You get like a nasty thud out of these boys. And there's like a few of them, like 5 or 6 of them. There's just, that's the thing. Ellenman had good matches all year, good title matches all year. But there is just a level of viciousness here that really elevates it. And that allows him as this like babyface ace figure guy who's carrying this new promotion. As this kind of role he's had to grow into a bit. This is like big plant your flag in this performance as the part where like he'd already had himself figured out, but this is where he really figured out his place in GLEAT for me. Top 10 time. Number 10, Jon Moxley versus Wheeler Yuta from Rampage. This is the TV match of the year. This is the best match that was given to you on free television this year. So as Wheeler Yuta fighting Bryan Danielson earlier, and then Jon Moxley to try and get his way into the Blackpool Combat Club because he went, I'm done being in the best friends. Those guys are goofs. I am here to learn how to fuck shit up. And so he gets a contract in blood to join the Blackpool Combat Club. This is another great, dominant, brutal performance from Moxley. Just testing Yuta's limits. Seeing what the kid's made of. Yuta gets a fucking gusher. So many people got incredible bleeds this year. So much blood this year. It was so fantastic. But this was one of the best ones. Yuta is absolutely caked in his own blood for most of this match. And it's this kind of perfect situation where he's just getting his ass kicked and it reaches a point where you're like, enough is enough, and then he fights back again and you're like, oh my god, I'm so with him forever. And he doesn't get there, but he gets so close and he gets so much out of getting so close, and it's like the best making of a guy that has happened in AEW. Over one night and a gallon of blood, Wheeler Yuta completely leveled up from like pin taker to, a threat. And so obviously Jon Moxley all over this fucking list. Another great performance from the guy, a big whoop, but he really was incredible here. Does not work nearly as well if there was an older, hairier man with more muscles brutalizing this poor young guy. Number 9. First Briscoes FTR match here. This was at Supercard of Honor on WrestleMania weekend. This was kind of a weird one. This was like being built on social media for a really long time. Little shots at each other about who's the best tag team ever and yada yada. Which, like, depending on who does it, feels kind of dorky. Even with them, it felt kind of dorky. But it worked out. Because this was an excellent match. The perfect start to the best pure wrestling feud of the year. It says they're covered by the camera. That's true. So it's not the feud of the year to me in the way that there's kind of the grandiosity of CM Punk and MJF, but this was terms of in-ring action, really hard to beat. This is a powder keg. I put it good there. The way there's already such immediate disrespect and kind of aggression in this match from the start, but the way that just like builds and like the tension gets pulled more and more until it finally breaks out and explodes, and they're just throwing themselves at each other everywhere and just beating the shit out of each other. It was just fantastic. It's just a great match. They start off, you know, their little tests of each other, and then once it finally gets time to throw some bombs, they throw some damn bombs. And for a lot of people also, this is a reminder of why the Briscoes are the greatest tag team of all time. This was, you know, especially tragically the last year that we got to see them as a tag team. They really got to go out here and put some of their best work they ever did in like a perfect encapsulation of why Mark and Jay were so special together and why Mark continues to be special. So just another fantastic match and a very, very, very good year for a lot of violent matches. Some good bleeds go on in here too. Number 8, couldn't get a picture of an action shot here. This is Astronauts versus Strong BJ. Abe and Nomura versus Okabayashi and Sekimoto. These teams, as kind of, I guess Astronauts are like the heirs, let's say, to Big Japan Wrestling. Sekimoto was kind of the original guy. Okabayashi, his clay son, the Golem, kind of came along next, and now Nomura and Abe are very much the future, both as singles and as tag competitors. Just like, you know, Strong BJ was the great super team, they've kind of becoming the great super team, and as they get further along, and as they get closer and closer to getting that big first win. It's had probably the loudest shots of the year. I don't know why I'm reading all my points from bottom to top, but it's just how it shakes out sometimes. They hit each other more than any other promotion. There are guys who will turn it on in big matches. Okada can be that guy sometimes, where certain matches where he's interested, he'll decide to throw hard, but other times he throws shitty little elbows. But BJW, with these 4 guys, you hear everything. Every single, is there some kind of thud or thunk or smack? They just beat the dog shit out of each other. I've probably said that a lot, but I'll keep saying it, because that's what it feels like. They turn each other red and black and blue all over. It is just like 30-minute masterclass, balls to the wall, tag team wrestling violence. And for Astronauts, as they keep climbing this mountain, being like a 30-minute draw here, fighting so valiantly to topple these like muscle orcs they're up against. And they keep inching closer, and they're going to get there one day, and it's going to be awesome. But just for what they do here and how close they get, it's still incredible and one of the best matches of the year. Now, earlier, talking about how Desperado and Jun Kasai saved some stuff for later. They had some stuff, and they were going to get to the meat of it. And this match is the meat of it. This is their singles match from Takataishi Despimania. So runner-up for Show of the Year. Super hot crowd for this. The best death match of the year. Not even particularly close, really. A great escalation. Important thing here is the escalation in violence from the tag match earlier. Just like the way... And I just noticed this also, this screen cap is not even from this match. This is from the tag match. But
it's still the right guys.
The same thing happens in this match. He also gets a bunch of skewers in his head. He's just in white gear. You saw the screen cap of him on the white gear in the other start. They do so much shit in here. They bring back the aluminum cans, which Desperado just kept using this year. He used it. He had a match with Moxley on SummerSlam weekend that also had the cans bit. They got skewers. They got barbed wire crosses. They got the board of knives. They got like a board with like razor blades or something on it. Also, they do an insane like Tiger Driver Canadian Destroyer into a board of just like metal forks that are propped up on chairs. There's a lot of gross shit that happens here, and it kicks ass. A lot of stuff I've never seen happen in a deathmatch before. I'm not the most well-versed wrestling guy. Said at the start, only been in the game of watching this for 5 years. But I've watched a fair amount of death matches in my time, and some stuff here is some stuff I've never seen before. Some real mean, violent shit. And Jun Kasai, very importantly, is incredibly believable as a total fucking psychopath maniac. A lot of people, it's another thing, a lot of people try to affect like, oh, I'm so crazy, I'm so violent. And few men are as believable as Jun Kasai. You just look at him, you see the scars all over his body, he's got like holes in his back. This is a guy who genuinely revels in the ultra-violent. And not just in experiencing it himself, but inflicting it on other people, and he has a gleeful smile every time he drives another knife into El Desperado. And the crowd cheers for it. That's the best part about it, is that the crowd loves Jun Kasai and loves that he's a maniac. So I love death matches. I love when death matches are good. This was the best death match of the year. Number 6. My beloved Biff Busick. His big return from mostly collecting dust in WWE and then getting unceremoniously dumped in the various pandemic cuts. Day 91, the first day he's available to compete after the no-compete runs out. He comes here and is reborn in blood against Slade, who was kind of, I guess the heir apparent to Biff's spot in Beyond Wrestling and that region in kind of the Northeast. One of my most anticipated matches of the year. As a big fan of Biff Busick, really loved this guy for a few years. First found him watching NXT when he was Oney Lorcan. One of my favorite tag matches from that era of NXT with Danny Burch against Roderick Strong and Kyle O'Reilly. And, that just prompts me to go dig into the backlog and see what he did in PWG and CZW and Beyond Wrestling. And he was amazing. He was so great. It feels like he was going to reach an even greater artistic career peak before he just went to WWE to do a whole lot of nothing. But we still have so much of him, and it was so exciting to have him back. And it was short-lived, but as far as like a return statement goes, watching him start out so tentative and then bleed a shit ton and get put through some doors and then to get more and more mean and violent in return and make Slade bleed and like Slade gets like a better bleed than Biff does in this match. He gets like a laceration, just like maybe when he takes the door straight to the dome and it breaks through, he just gets carved up real bad and just gushes and drips everywhere, all over everything, and it adds a lot. Just a guy dripping his own blood onto a chair that he's going to go beat the shit out of another motherfucker with. So, another really mean, violent match from guys I really like, and I like mean, violent matches. But this one, the excitement of Biff being back, the excitement of the crowd to see him again, really elevated this above a lot of other ones. And speaking of Biff, number 5, Jon Moxley versus Biff Busick at Bloodsport. You've seen this one.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, this was an insane gusher. Oh my gosh.
He gets a real gusher. This
And
is
it starts like early.
it starts early, and he's
It
just like
keeps going and going.
the rare match where John Moxley is covered in blood and not a single bit of it is his own. This was another huge hit in the year for Moxley. What I would call a great statement match for Biff as a wrestler. The kind of things that he was great at, and the kind of things that this match is great at, where it's like a blood sport match, but it's not like what you think of, where it's this like UWF adjacent kind of MMA inspired setup, but it's just a really great, and another, I said earlier, a lot of great Moxley matches from the start of the year have a lot of grappling focus. And because of this environment that this is, and who Biff Busick is as a wrestler, there is a lot of really great, violent grappling stuff here before it breaks out into the big strikes and suplexes and blood everywhere. There's just like brutality and meanness in the way he stretches him. He's getting his Stu Hart reps in, just pulling him every which way. And the blood sport environment makes this so much more exciting. The crowd there is so excited to see this kind of match. It was just everything great about the show Bloodsport, everything great about both these guys as wrestlers. Everything that I love is here. Number 4, Japanese match of the year, Kazusada Higuchi versus Konosuke Takeshita. Off the bat, best performance in kind of, a career-defining year for Higuchi. Just a complete force of nature. This horrifying man that just keeps coming. And on the way, like, you could say that about Slade. Slade's whole gimmick is that he is, the Michael Myers of professional wrestling, and they use a lot of horror show analogies and stuff for him. But in terms of, like, let's say a Tomohiro Ishii type wrestler where he'll take a lot of damage and stumble but just keep walking forward. That's the kind of guy Higuchi is. He's just like a horrifying tank who's charging forward to beat the dog shit out of you. And, in the DDT environment, few guys kind of deserve it more than Konosuke Takeshita. A guy who's really been asleep at the wheel the past few years. This is his best performance in a Japanese title match since 2019, since the Ultimate Party match with Harashima. He cuts out the fat. All the great things about these Higuchi title matches is that he cuts out the fat. There is no perfunctory shit here just to show that they're good wrestlers or that they know what they're doing. He just comes in and throws some mean forearms and elbows and chops and headbutts. One of the greatest parts of this match is they do the Nigel Bryan ring post spot. If you remember the Unified match, where they grab each other by the arms and jam each other into the ring post.
Yeah.
Takeshita does that to Higuchi, and Higuchi just kind of stays there for a while with his head on the ring post, and then just walks and charges forward and headbutts Takeshita as hard as he can. It's brilliant.
Like, oh, you think that pull was hard? I'll show you hard.
Yeah, I'll show
That
you
did
hard.
Nothing to me.
My little fucking skull right here. Just another, like,
Tanjiro headbutt.
really hard-hitting, violent match. A lot of headbutts. I'm repeating myself here a lot. Because the things that I like tend to share a lot of similar qualities. And the thing that sets this one apart is that there's, like, the miracle of the Higuchi win. But then, in the title defenses, it kind of feels like you're waiting for the other shoe to drop. His first defense was against Tetsuya Endo, and it felt like, oh, well, they're just going to go back to him. And then they didn't. Instead, Endo got owned really bad, and it was great. And then here it's like, well, maybe they give it to Takeshita because he's going to go back to America, have him as their champion around there to show off and get some eyes on DDT, or maybe just have him work more matches here because they want stability. No, we are sticking with our choice. That was the most important thing for DDT's course correction in the year, is that they stuck to their guns with Higuchi. They went in there and they went, if this is going to be the guy, this is going to be our guy. and we're going all the way with him. And that is a lot of what contributes to this match, especially watching it the first time, was like the realization that they are going all the way with him, and that this is Endo and Takeshita are DDT's two golden boys right now, and they let Higuchi run over both of them. It's like a physically dominant performance over them. Not just like he got the win or he hurt them, but like he made them look stupid. It's great. It's so awesome. Number 3.
Ooh.
Wow. It was hard. All the top 3 at some point could have been match of the year. And until the number 1 match happened, it was this. When the number 2 match happened, and then I was unsure, and then I went back and watched them all. And these are probably the 3 spots I kind of agonized over the most. They're the most interchangeable in a lot of ways. But Sami Zayn versus Johnny Knoxville is the new measuring stick for all celebrity matches and all comedy-based matches. It does not get better than this, man. This match is funny and so cool and creative. There is like, I talk about creativity in death matches and hardcore matches, but in terms of just like this weird gimmicked plunder kind of nonsense that you get in WWE, and with a guy like Sami Zayn who goes all in and sells it completely and is one of the greatest of all time, and a guy like Knoxville who more than any other guest understands wrestling. There have been a lot of celebrity matches, and I don't want to cast too much shade on like the Bad Bunny match, because that's a guy who trained really hard to do wrestling and get to live out a dream and try to do wrestling his way. I will shit on Logan Paul because he's a fraud. I will shit on Pat McAfee because he's a hack. But Johnny Knoxville understands that wrestling is not about doing moves. It is about taking punishment. It is about suffering, and he is a man who has built a career on suffering. And that is a thing that adds a lot to this. The idea of like, how is Johnny Knoxville surviving? Where is he pulling this shit out of? Well, he's just kind of a psycho. It's a guy who like got a motorcycle handlebar in his cock and had to pee out of a catheter for years because of it. He's been through more than almost any man on this earth could ever hope to go through if they wanted it. And so him just goofing around, there was like a weird level of legitimacy to it. And you don't even need that because this shit's just funny. Pontius shows up, gets his hog out, Wee Man shows up and slams Sami Zayn. Dark Shark is in the audience, everyone gets together to put him in a giant mousetrap. It's just like the most pure fun. Not like, other stuff that I would praise is like fun in the way of wrestling violence, but just in terms of like pure fun. You can show this to your dad and he'll probably just get it because he's your dad, so he also understands that dudes fucking rock. Sami Zayn versus Johnny Knoxville, number 3. Number 2, FTR versus the Briscoes at Final Battle, the double dog collar match. This is another bloody one. This was one that had like no build at all because the Briscoes were like banned from TV until Jay died, which sucked really bad. But even despite that, a near perfect violent brawl. All 4 of these guys in this match bleed, and they bleed a shit ton. And the way they wrestle this from the jump, there's a score to settle for Mark and Jay. They lost at Supercard. They lost the 2 out of 3 falls match. This is their last shot to come in here and really get their titles back and get a big win over FTR. And so they're desperate and they're mean and they're aggressive. And there's so many like little things about the way this match has worked too, from the perspective of like the mechanics of it, I guess. Because it's not just story-wise, this great mean fight, these guys finally trying to get their win, but just like the tentative ways they start out, set up with the collars. This like, there is never a moment in this match where they are tangled. There's a moment in the CM Punk MJF dog collar match where MJF just gets his wires completely crossed and the chain is all stuck in the ropes and he has to go up and around to get it unhooked and like takes the wind out of it for a second. There's not a moment where these guys don't know exactly where the chain is, exactly where they need it to be. So everything just goes off so smoothly but also feels so spontaneous and disgusting. It's like it's hard to say more stuff about these matches because you just kind of have to see them. But this one, so much emotion in it, and even going back, if you're gonna look and say this had to be Jay Briscoe's last match. There are not many better matches to go out on than this one. That takes us to number one, which was number one. When I saw it, and then there was doubt, as I said previously, but by God, Anarchy in the Arena, Jericho Appreciation Society versus the BCC and LAX, if you're a 2017 Impact fan. It was just amazing. Wild thing. Just plays like 4 times in this match in a row.
Oh, it's so good.
As they're all just beating the shit out of each other. They're immediately bleeding all over the place. They're spread out all over the arena. That's the craziest part, is that this is the match of the year, and I didn't even really experience it. Because if you're like there live and just every direction you look, some fucked up shit is happening to someone.
Unimaginable.
That's insane. I mean, AEW's made like a tradition since 2020 with the Stadium Stampede of doing these like yearly big all over the place brawls in the stadium, but this is far and away the best one they've done, the most crazy one they've done. Everyone in this match came out looking like a monster. Like, a lot of this sits on the talent of Eddie Kingston, who so badly wants to get back at Jericho for burning his face and for not giving him the respect that he said he'd give him if he beat him in that match. And he's driven insane by it. And the shot of Eddie walking out covered in blood with a gas can, ready to actually light Jericho on fire. Like, you watch this and you're like, this is a fake thing, but you see that and you're like, I thought that was real.
Yeah.
I thought he was really gonna do it. He's deranged.
That's how deranged he is, man. You really just thought the whole ring was gonna get lit up.
Yeah, I mean, like, Mox, expert in this kind of shit. Brian, expert. Everyone here at 2.0, Proud and Powerful, all do a really great job just bumping around and taking a lot of punishment. Daniel Garcia is another great moment and a great year for him, getting to brawl out the back with Eddie Kingston all over the place. Fucking Daddy Magic gets covered in mustard. So much shit happens. Even just like Mox and Jericho brawling for so long, and you hit each other with like camera rigs. Jericho ripping out the cord so Wild Thing stops playing, gets a lot of boos for that, and then you see this picture, putting Brian in the walls and also choking him with the ring ropes. It's just incredible. And a year of a lot of very creative, violent matches, this was somehow the most creative and the most violent and the most insane, and it is the match of the year. Now we're going to take a sip. And get into the wrestler of the year. Hopefully I will talk less and say maybe more unique things.
Yeah, you can talk as much as you want.
But we'll see.
It's the beauty that keeps the YouTube channel.
You
get it all out.
I'm repeating myself a lot, I worry.
I don't know, I feel like sometimes like when I make videos, it's because like it sticks out more to you, I think, when you're saying it. But for like the audience, I don't think it comes across as like it's not as noticeable.
Yeah, I guess I shouldn't have drawn attention to it then. Anyways,
Sure.
Wrestler of the Year. We got 20 of these boys. Number 20, Jamie Hayter. I wish
that should be higher.
I wish I could put her higher.
You're kind of a full-on simp for this girl.
I am a huge Jamie Hayter fan. I think she's
You don't
excellent.
watch.
I've loved her since she was even in Stardom. She was a great bruiser there. The problem is that as much as her individual performances over the year have always been great, it has not always been in service of great matches. Because for most of the year, she was in tag matches with Britt Baker against a lot of okay opponents. She had some good singles opportunities here and there. But for me, the only like hard recommend I can give is the Hikaru Shida match, where after she wins the title, she got to go out there with like the other best woman on the roster and do the best American women's match of the year. The Toni Storm match is good for the title win. They work well together, but Toni Storm is just not a wrestler that I like very much. A lot of her work just feels a little lifeless to me. So she's not bad, but she's not the greatest. But I still think that match is worth a watch more than some other ones. But over this past year, you can basically watch any match with Jamie Hayter in it, and I think you will come away thinking that Jamie Hayter was really good. And that is why it is fitting that the best wrestler on the women's roster holds the women's championship. Please, God, book some storylines for her. They have like one storyline in the women's division right now. It's not good, and it doesn't really even involve like the title. Do more, please. There's so much money just on the table and not having her just have matches every 2 or 3 weeks. She's so good, and I wanted her to be higher, but this is the highest you can justify her, at least to me.
That's fair. That's fair.
Number 19, the Briscoes. This is not a volume case. This is a peaks case. And the peaks are we had like 5 matches this year, and 2 of them were some of the best tag matches ever, and the rest of them were at least pretty cool. I said a lot about them before, talking about the matches. Say it again here. I think they're the greatest tag team of all time. We have lost Jay Briscoe. We are not going to get any more Briscoes matches. We're going to get more Mark, and that is a blessing in itself. But as a year to go out on, to go, this is what the Briscoes are all about. Great fucking tag team wrestling and great brawls. You got them both. And, you know, maybe it's a bit of a sentimental choice, but they're here. Number 18, Biff Busick. It's another guy I really wish I could put higher, but he came back to wrestling for about 3 months, and then the last I heard is just working as a coach again in NXT down in Orlando, which is tragic to me. At the very least, put the guy on television working with the young guys or something. I don't know. He's one of my favorite wrestlers. I really love watching this guy work, and I at the very least feel lucky that we got this much out of him this year, back on the indies. 2 of these matches I already talked about in the best matches of the year, near the top even, which I think should tell you something. But he has a lot of other great little work here and there. He did a couple shots in PWG. I didn't catch any of the PWG stuff from this year because it's always on like an 8-month tape delay or something insane. So it's just like, fuck off. But he had a match with Mike Bailey in there, so that was probably awesome. 17, Suzu Suzuki. I talked about her a bit earlier, but I'll go in a little more here. The Prominence invasion of Stardom was one of the only things keeping it afloat this year in my mind. One of the only like interesting things. A lot of people bought into Stardom as like the new prestige promotion with the best matches, etc. And like, I am not immune to hot girl blinders, but a lot of what they have is not it. But Suzu Suzuki, she's like my age. She's like 22 or 23, maybe a little older. She's the real fucking deal, man. Her, honorable mention as well to Mirai, who's another wrestler who could have snuck onto this list as just like very consistent undercard performances in Stardom. And then obviously Suzu gets to go out into the independent stuff, do prominent stuff, do death matches. Toru Sugiura was a great death match. The Tomoki Inaba match, which I talked about. Her match with Mirai. She had a couple matches with Mirai this year that were both pretty excellent. There were 2 two of the best young wrestlers Stardom has. And Suzu Suzuki feels like maybe the best women's wrestler in the world. Or in the very least, she's getting more opportunities to show that than Jamie Hayter is on a big stage. So she's on here. She's great. You should check out her work. I haven't even checked out that much of her work. I saw a lot of her Stardom stuff, and anything I've seen of her on the Independents is even better. So you can assume that in like Wave, she's probably just doing something insane. 16, Jun Kasai. It's another, I guess, Peaks case. I watched some of his other Freedoms death matches. Obviously, he's got kind of a formula, but he's still like always fun to watch. And the thing that like puts him on here, and I guess makes El Desperado miss it, who can easily be also on here, is basically just I was more excited by what Jun Kasai did, and not just his two matches with Desperado, which obviously were fantastic, but also a great match in GLEAT against the Bulk Orchestra, which is a great little stable of huge jacked guys who love being huge and jacked and friends, which is a great idea for a group.
Amazing name too. The Bulk Orchestra.
Yeah, and you know, teaming against them with Masashi Takeda, who's another like I probably just fucked up his name really bad. It was just another great deathmatch wrestler. A guy who like got super popular online in like 2016ish, but he'd like been doing great stuff even before then. Super another like really cool, unique guy who's also just like fucking covered in scars. Number 15, Kairi. Kairi did not make it onto a match of the year list for me. She did not have, I guess, like any super hit. A lot of 4-star stuff, but Kairi is another one of my favorite women's wrestlers. It's another one that I first saw in NXT and WWE. Watched her become champion. Watched her very swiftly lose it back to Shayna Baszler, which I was very mad about. And then just kind of float around doing stuff here and there. And then she left. She just was gone for like 2 years. She didn't wrestle at all. Just moved back to Japan to like get married and stuff. But this year she came back, and maybe not in terms of like, oh, she had peaked in this like really great, consistently awesome matches, but in terms of like someone who I always enjoyed watching and whose stuff on a show, especially on a show like Stardom, which feels so bereft often of like heart and kind of genuineness, she still feels really genuine. She still is one of the best baby faces in the world, and you still really believe in her and want to get behind her. And with her big return tag match with Mayu, her tag match with Natsupoi, just like having this kind of feel-good playing the hits here, where she got to go around and team with like people she's mentored, people who've mentored her, some of her greatest rivals, against a good mix of good and bad opponents, and then getting to cap it all off with becoming the first IWGP Women's Champion against Mayu Iwatani in a great match at a historic crossover, which is another show that probably could have been on, you know, consideration for show of the year. It's hard to name every honorable mention, but she just had a great year. She only has like one real stinker, which was a 30-minute draw with Saya Kamitani, but draws are hard, and they're made harder when you have just like a dull void as your opponent. So I don't hold that too much against her. It's hard to make like 20 minutes against Saya Kamitani interesting, so it is what it is. 14, Ishii. It feels like a meme to put Ishii on a Wrestler of the Year list. I feel like very annoying people who really love New Japan are always like, get bit 141, best Pitbull, best bout wrestler. Always, everyone has their best match with Ishii. Yeah, like all these memes are really fucking annoying. But from what I watched this year, because obviously this is all just from my own research of what I was able to find time for, he was actually pretty great. There's one performance that I will hold against him where he wrestled Timothy Thatcher at WrestleMania weekend and just chose to not give a single fuck, didn't sell at all, just kind of did his shit and went home, which was a real piss off. But Suzuki did that on that show too. They both just coasted, so I assume they were just not getting paid enough to care. But otherwise, from his outside of Japan stuff that I watched, because I did not really bother to watch much New Japan this year, he was great. I mean, all the New Japan stuff I did watch was like in America, like the strong stuff. So his match against Suzuki was at a strong show in America. That was great. The Dontaku match against Tanahashi for the IWGP US title was in Japan, and that was good. That was like, I don't know. There's a lot of matches. It's another thing I said way earlier about main event tendencies starting to bleed into the undercard. It's just like, oh, this is a title match, so it has to be like 30 minutes. But him and Tanahashi are better than anyone at getting a lot out of that time. So they still were able to make some magic happen. His match against Eddie Kingston, I picked the Capital Collision one. He also had a great match on like the pre-show of All Out, the 0 hour, which is free on YouTube, so you can watch that one as well. They're like pretty similar, but Capital Collision just has a bit more of like a selling performance, I guess, from Eddie instead of more just like balls to the wall, we're hitting each other. Crowd pleaser. This one has a little more nuance to it. A lot of great stuff. And then Ren Narita, who's another guy who like just barely missed this list. Had a pretty great year. Was really coming to his own as like the best project young lion that is kind of floating out there right now. The excursion system is failing a lot of guys. Hasn't really done well for Shota Umino. Obviously, Master Wato suffered a lot from it. But Ren Narita came back and was brilliant because he just got to train with Shibata. So, you know, I guess that's just all you need to be a good wrestler is to become mini Shibata. But him and Ishii had a real barn burner. But, you know, a great year of solid, steady work from Ishii. And especially in America, getting to kind of put the stuff on for a new hot crowd who gets to fully cheer instead of just clap. And also not hamstrung by all these weird needs New Japan has for you to go 100 years every match. Getting to just have these like really nice 15 to 20 minute affairs all over the place really does a lot for him. Naomi Yoshimura, number 13. So a really great year for this guy. Unfortunately cut short because he got injured in the Grand Prix. But, I mean, I liked him in Nautilus, but it always felt like Yuki Ueno was kind of the breakout guy from that. Yoshimura always felt a little bit in the dust. You know, Ueno gets to be with Takeshita, and they have their whole thing about being childhood friends, and he's just like a lot of natural charisma and stuff. And Yoshimura has that too, but he was just not as emphasized. And so, you know, going into the King of DDT finals, I was like, oh, well, Ueno's going to win, and then Akiyama's going to win, and then it's going to be like Ueno beating Akiyama probably in the finals, or maybe Akiyama will just have another title reign. And instead, none of that happened, and Yoshimura really got to show up and show out and do a lot of really great stuff. I mean, even before that in the tournament, his match with Harashima, obviously Harashima just kind of has great matches with everybody because he's an all-timer, but you can let it down, and he did not. He excelled. He excelled as his tag partner earlier in the year. He excelled against him. Great run through the King of DDT. Some really fun matches in the Grand Prix as well. And then these also great tag matches with Higuchi. I'll take the Asuka Mao one, even though I'm not a huge Mao guy, over the one against Sasuke and Kanon, because those guys both kind of blow. But great year from Yoshimura. I'm really excited for him to come back whenever he's better. Our little reggae man. God bless you. Number 12, Irie, Shigeru Irie. Talked about him earlier. There's a great shot of him making a real Irie face. It's not like, I don't know. It's weird. I guess because I didn't see like a ton of him. It was mostly in GLEAT and tag stuff where I thought he was pretty good. He had some singles matches here and there. And then the big thing for me was World Tag Fest His run with Abe I thought was great. His big match against El Lindemann, and then his match in BJW against Yuji Okabayashi, which is not like, reinventing the wheel, but as far as a match for the guys hitting each other hard title goes, they hit each other really hard, and it's really fun to watch that. He's been around, for a really long time. I feel like people who know him know how good he is. That's something that Mike Bailey said recently in an interview about his big WrestleMania weekend schedule with Post Wrestling, which is a great Canadian wrestling outlet. If you're interested in following wrestling news, I recommend Post. They're from Toronto. But Mike Bailey did an interview with them. We talked about wrestling Irie on the 2023 WrestleMania weekend. And he talked about how guys who know Irie know that he's fantastic, but for guys kind of been bouncing around DDT and BJW and now GLEAT and all these kind of Japanese smaller promotions, a lot of people, at large aren't aware of him, but he is fantastic, and he had a lot of great ways to show out this year. And that's why he's in number 12. He was in, the best, or, second best Japanese title match of the year. Until Takeshita happened, it was the best match of the year. Number 11, CM Punk. There he is with his muffins.
The muffin.
I don't give a shit.
Legendary muffin promo.
Listen, I'm not here to say if he was right or wrong for anything he said or did. I'm here to say that it was all funny, and that it is not my job to make him get along with other people. It is my job to watch and enjoy what he does. He is a fantastic wrestler, and he had a hell of a first, quarter of the year before he got injured and then got injured again. But what work we did get from him was amazing. And, it's hard with kind of the lack of volume, I guess, to really put him higher. But the Wrestler of the Year placements for me are so, vibes-based and, not scientific, other than vague ideas of where I think stuff should go. Great, got the best MJF performance to date, to the current day of March 29th, 2023. So he has gotten in the dog collar match a really great, simple kind of throwback wrestling match with Dustin Rhodes on Dynamite. That's a really great little match. That it's another one that feels like a little overlooked. The people I follow are definitely into it, but I think overall it's not one that was getting looked at for match of the year. But it's just a very satisfying TV match, and not just in the way that it was a match that was on TV, but a TV style match. It was really great, and when it was time to be on pay-per-view, did great with Hangman Page, even though apparently he was worried he was going to shoot on him or something. That sounds like a little horseshit. People say shit all the time. And he did great with Moxley. The Moxley match was one I kind of underrated at the time, because I was expecting there to be some kind of twist instead of Punk just winning. But I don't know, when you go back and watch it, and you're not an idiot, and you realize that it's just a great babyface performance, and that Mox was great as just completely healing it up in front of a hometown Chicago crowd that were all 100% there for Punk. I hope he comes back. I really do. There's word that he wants to come back. Wrestling is better with CM Punk in it. That's just a fact. There was a void that was left when he left in 2014 that was not filled until he returned. And I hope to God that he comes back somewhere. Top 10. Eddie Kingston. Eddie Kingston is a guy who should be in the top 5. But Chris Jericho happened to him this year, so there was only so much he could do.
He's too busy appreciating.
That said, still a pretty great year for him. Despite what I just said, the Jericho match, the first one, was great. Being sucked into the feud forever, not so great. But he still got to do some great stuff working with Strong. His match against Ishii, he had a great match against Gabriel Kidd earlier in the year. That was kind of a sleeper hit. There's a big fuck-off elimination match. Then, obviously, Anarchy in the Arena. You're about to see that on a lot of guys' match recommendations card. And then the other Ishii match later you can put on here. I decided to put his match versus Jun Akiyama on the Full Gear buy-in. This was a match that Eddie has been asking for years, and it was like so great to see him get it, and also see that Akiyama was like 100% game for it. It's another match that like missed the best of the year list just by a hair. So, yeah, no, Eddie Kingston feels like they shouldn't have missed on him. Feels like this is a guy who should still be in AEW main events, and they de-emphasized him. Some of that was because of getting into a backstage fight with Sammy Guevara. But, you know, even being relegated to like pre-show buy-ins and Rampage, he is still on the individual talent level one of the best in the world. And even with as much as he was hamstrung, he still gets this high because that's how fucking good he is. Number 9, Wheeler Yuta. It was hard to figure out where to put him. It was either going to be him or the person after him, who you will see as above each other. But this was a really great year for Yuta. Last year, he was, very low-key, kind of pin-eating young guy. Brought in as, a whole hot prospect. As far as AEW is concerned, he was all over the indies doing a lot of great work last year, including one of the best matches of last year, which was somehow a 60-minute time limit draw with Daniel Garcia on IWTV 100, I think. But this year, Daniel joined the BCC. He got a lot more opportunities for a lot of great matches, and it didn't always come together perfectly for me. All his Pure stuff was great. I thought the MJF TV match was like sneakily great. Obviously, the mock stuff was a big hit. I thought it wasn't until the Daniel Garcia match at Final Battle at the bottom here that he really a switch flipped for him, where there was something he was really missing. Where the idea behind him joining the Combat Club was like, oh, he's going to get more like mean and violent and really make him work for stuff, and it wasn't really coming across until that match, and then it really clicked. So, and even with that, he's a number 9. But I think 2023 he could go even bigger, especially now that Ring of Honor has their own show, so he can be wrestling consistently. He's already had a great year in 2023. He's a kid with a lot of potential. I know. I'm a big fan of him. And I'm also a big fan of Daniel Garcia, baby. Daniel Garcia, it's hard to follow up last year. 2021, he was probably like second or third best wrestler that year. But this year, still really great. He was in Anarchy of the Arena, which is already just a huge boon. He got to have 3 matches with Yuta. They have fantastic chemistry together. And he got to have 2 big, huge matches with Bryan Danielson. There's a lot of other great smaller scale TV stuff against Moxley and Kingston. Other young guys out there. Not as much independent stuff this year. Mostly stayed focused on AEW. Some other, later tape stuff like PWG. But another, best in the world of young talent who is developing at an incredible rate. He's a guy who was already great on the independents, and since coming to TV has just gotten better and better. So another great year for Daniel Garcia. Let's talk about Speedball. Speedball Mike Bailey. He's probably the highest volume of matches wrestled out of anyone on this list. This guy was impossible to avoid if you wanted to. In 2022, this guy was fucking everywhere. All over GCW, all over West Coast, PWG. He had a stint in DPW over in the Southeast. Got to do some strong stuff. He joined Impact. Everywhere, this guy. And it helps and hinders him. And the thing is that, this kind of traveling act, I think that we have to remember about wrestling in the age of every fucking show ever done being recorded and put online is that This is still wrestled for a live audience. And that, Speedball is one of the guys that you could definitely knock for having kind of the same stuff in a lot of his matches. But at the end of the day, it's also kind of because, like, if you're wrestling one night in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and then you're going into Detroit, and then you're going over across the board to Winnipeg or whatever, like, these are all different people who are coming maybe for the first time to see you do your thing, and especially on the independents, that's a big deal. You're a traveling guy, so you want to give the Speedball match to everyone that you can, to as many markets as you can. So for us watching at home, this becomes kind of a thing where it's like, oh, I've seen him do this before. He does the Speedball Bombs match, or he does the legwork match. But regardless of that, those matches are still pretty good. These ones here were some real standouts. Getting a blessed American Jay White match where he doesn't have to go 50 minutes for no fucking reason against Okada. Getting to work with Alex Shelley, who's just like an all-time great independent wrestler, or just wrestler in general. Really like interesting little match against Yuya Uemura in Bloodsport, and then getting to be one of the big matches in the big indie campaign for Takeshita in the summer. Especially after being stuck off in fucking banned from America land for so long. It was a really great year for Speedball, a really big comeback.
I had visa issues, right?
Yeah,
So we couldn't wrestle in the States?
trying to come across the border too many times. They said stay away for like 6 years.
Jesus.
But, and he did great work in that time in Japan and in Canada, but now he's back. And this is kind of the year that it feels like he should have had, like, in 2017. But it's better late than never, and he's as good as he's ever been. So here we go. Bryan Danielson, last year's Wrestler of the Year. I wish I could have him higher. He is my favorite wrestler of all time. He is, to me, the greatest wrestler of all time. He is the Bryan Danielson Best Technical Wrestler Award recipient.
That's so cool.
He's so fantastic. And this year, another guy who Chris Jericho happened to this year. Just like, especially when you basically, not basically, he literally only wrestles in AEW. You gotta have big hits on pay-per-view. And when two of your pay-per-view matches are kind of stinkers that involve Chris Jericho, it really hurts the case. And it bums me out that it hurts the case, but it is what it is. And he still is, almost in the top 5, just off of really incredible earlier performances and his stuff with Daniel Garcia. All you have to do to get this guy on the Best Wrestler of the Year list is to just give him some matches on TV and let him cook. And he's already probably had a better 2023 based off of that alone. It's another thing, wrestling is better when you just have Bryan Danielson wrestling on TV every week. It's like not hard. He was in tons of great 6-man stuff with Mox and Wheeler at the start of the BCC. Stuff with Claudio once he joined. Anywhere you look, you are going to find something good that he's done, something that you can learn from, something that you're going to find a new appreciation for. And, as much as I frame it as like a negative thing, it's not bad to be the 6th best wrestler in a year. It's just like, he could have been higher if there wasn't just stuff that he was not in control of fully. Some of it he is in control of. He could probably politic more and protect himself more in more of a spot, but he's just clearly not that guy. And there are worse qualities to have than being like too friendly. So I'm not really going to knock him that hard for it. Number 5. Gotta give it up to Konosuke Takeshita, man. This is a guy who I would not have put here in the first half of the year. Because until he came to AEW, I was like, God, what a fucking brutally boring, terrible run he was on. He had some fun stuff. A lot of the six-man stuff was fun, but a lot of that also hinges on the fact that he did not have to be the focal point of the match. Him versus Endo at Judgment, I said earlier, huge fucking egg. Not good. Just a real misfire. But then he came to America, and as it is with a lot of guys, when you were given smaller amounts of time and a new audience and like a new energy, he was just completely reinvigorated. And then that carried over to when he went back to Japan and was wrestling with way more pep in his step. And I don't, I understand it's easy to get complacent when you're kind of pushed as this like athletic wunderkind who by the age of 27, like 6 years in the business or something, has basically done everything there was to do in DDT. But you still got to put in the performances, no matter what. Harashima had done it all, and he still tried. So I'll knock him for that. But he came into America with a fire in his ass, and he's just been so exciting. He's been so fun to see on AEW TV. He's just so likable in this environment. I didn't think I would say that about him. He's usually just like a dead-eyed athletic freak. But getting to play to this American crowd who are just like, I don't know what it is. Sometimes guys come over here and they just flop, but people were just in love with this dude from the word go. And it's been, completely to his benefit because he's been feeding off of that energy. Has done a lot of great stuff this year. This is just a handful. He was all over the indies against other guys like Lee Moriarty. He was in PWG. He was having Garcia matches. Like, really, really shockingly great year for him. Number 4. Hey, guys. Look who it is.
Hey, the top guy.
It's FTR, baby. Now, here's the thing. There was a very pushed campaign for like specifically Dax Harwood as a wrestler of the year because they keep giving him these singles matches, but they all kind of play out the same, and I just like see through it. So I'm not humoring that shit. It's not on here. I didn't think any of them were particularly like great enough. Maybe the Punk match, but like you're in there with CM Punk, so But tag team wise, these guys were untouchable this year. They really were. And the Briscoes matches are a huge part of it, obviously. But they also became IWGP Tag Champions and had a great match of Forbidden Door, another great one in the Fall Tour against Great O'Con and Jeff Cobb. All over AEW TV with these like sleeper great matches. Their first match with the Young Bucks at Full Gear 2020, stinker. Did not like it. This year, insane, completely the other way. It was amazing. It was like the best Young Bucks performance since like 2018. The most focused they've been in years. They finally, they still went big, but they got the chemistry right for that one. And then just pulling great big TV main events out of guys like Swerve and Our Glory, who were a great tag team, but were kind of, quickly cobbled together. Got stuff out of the Acclaimed, who are a lot more, like, simple as a babyface team.
I love the Acclaimed.
The Acclaimed are great. So, just a real banner year for FTR. The first couple years in AEW, I wasn't super sold on them. I liked their stuff in NXT. I thought they were good. I thought they were great even. I liked their, American Alpha stuff as well. But then they came in, Hangman Kenny match was not so great, Bucks match was bad. Then they was floating around for a while. They're in the Pinnacle. They're having this feud with the Lucha Bros, which they just did not have great chemistry, but they came out the gate hot this year, and they stayed hot the whole year. And it's carrying into 2023, that momentum, that energy is there for them. As faces, they're working maybe even better than they worked as heels. So, big ups to FTR. Now we get to the top 3. Mm-hmm. Top 3 are also all guys that I could see the argument for as number 1. But it's my list. You don't own me. These are my rankings. Number 3, El Lindaman. he's been good for a while, and he's had his whole thing figured out for a while. But this year was a big test for him. As far as like, it's one thing to be like in Strong Hearts and be the faces of the company together, but to be the inaugural title holder and the guy who is, everything is kind of hinging on is a tough task for anyone, and he totally stepped up and killed it. And not that I didn't expect him to do well, but he really surpassed a lot of expectations, I think, and put a lot of eyes on Glee because of it. The start of the year in the title tournament, great matches with T-Hawk, then Irie, a run in the Best of Super Juniors, great match with El Desperado, which is kind of like, yeah, obviously. Then getting maybe a match that I'm kind of the high man on. I wasn't as in love with the Dookie match as I liked the Takanori Ito match. Ito is a very interesting wrestler to me, as the way Glee is trying to build him up as like a pro wrestler, but who can also do UWF and putting him in both all the time. And that style kind of meshing with Lindemann was really fun. Another bigger guy, another guy bigger than him that he got to get in there with, just like the strengths of the Irie match. This mountain to climb, this boulder to lift. And then finishing off strong against Kaito Ishida, who's kind of become the top heel there, getting their first match together. Had a big rematch at the start of this year, but this was just their first match together, and it was fantastic. Another flagship show. Glee is just, it's an easy watch, and part of the reason it was an easy watch is because you always knew you were going to see this little fucking guy in it. Number 2, brother. We're almost there. It's Higuchi. It's the Gooch. He could have been 1. I thought about it, but at the end of the day, he'll have to settle for only being the second greatest. But
silver medal this year.
I've talked so much already about these matches. The feeling of him winning the title finally, the feeling of like realizing the other shoe was not going to drop in the way you thought when he beat Endo and Takeshita. He was the fucking man this year. He got to fucking right the ship, get DDT back on track, and just kick ass the whole way. And even do, his match with Shinya Aoki, which is kind of outside of the realm of what you normally get in these kind of matches, was really interesting and exciting. He can do it all, but he always does it in his own way, and he does it so well. I've gushed about him enough already. So let's get to number 1. This is, I think everyone marked this pretty early. It's Jon Moxley, baby.
I'm not surprised.
I don't think a lot of people were. 5 big hits on pay-per-view this year. The last one, the MJF match, not as huge of an MJF guy, but even then, killed it with Bryan, killed it in Anarchy in the Arena as a focal point of the match, killed it with CM Punk, killed it with Tanahashi. Great little independent run, GCW title holder, had a fun little match with Tony Deppen, some other matches there, Nick Gage match, which was a little disappointing, but it was still cool to see them go against each other again. Mike Bailey on the Independents, a big first-time matchup. El Desperado for New Japan. All kinds of little New Japan matches throughout the year. He was just everywhere. He was inescapable. He was in all the major promotions that are affiliated with AEW, basically. Absolutely showing up everyone there. Bleeding a fucking gallon every time he stepped in the ring. I love this guy, man. He was one of the first people I gravitated to when I started watching WWE, when he was Dean Ambrose. I was bummed when he was injured for so long. When he left, nothing was more exciting to me, already having been so excited for AEW, than him showing up at the end of their first show and just being a completely different guy. And, he was Wrestler of the Year in 2019 to me. He was Wrestler of the Year in 2020 to me. He has just been on such an incredible run and cementing himself as not just like a great wrestler, a guy who did pretty good in WWE, a great, deathmatch indie guy from back in the day, but one of the greatest wrestlers of all time, the greatest wrestler of this era, and the greatest wrestler of 2022.
Hell yeah.
as my dude.
Just look at him, man. He
So-
is wrestling.
He just is everything I love about wrestling in one man.
Mm.
And you know, that's a wrap, baby.
That's a wrap.
That's 2022 in wrestling.
Nice job.
I'm gonna try to do it for 2023.
Yeah.
I have a spreadsheet this time, so it'll be a lot easier.
It's just
but-
getting logged.
If you somehow watched all of this, thank you. If you are a Keats viewer, thank you for deciding to watch something that isn't a long video about anime.
It's a long video about wrestling.
And if you're
Nice little change
if
of
you're a
pace.
big wrestling fan, you're seeing this for some reason, leave a comment. I love talking to people about wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
So that's it.
See ya.
Goodbye.